What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another week of Hero or Zero here on the Heroes for Hire podcast. My name is Conor Lawler, and I am not joined as always by my best pal, Mr. Shaun, and he is not with us this week, so I am here by my lonesome. And what that means is, you've probably seen by the title, it means we get to talk about a Batman character from the Bat family. Because that's just kind of my favourite thing to talk about on Heroes or Zeros. So, and when Shaun's here, he makes too many jokes. He makes too many, this is the no joke zone currently for this week. And he just, he's too weird. Somebody tell him that. Actually, I'll text him after this. I'll let him know. Don't talk behind his back. Tell him straight up. But yeah, so this is Hero Zero. This is the show where we choose one comic book character every single week. We talk their good points and their bad points, and we generally just give you a bit of a rundown of everything to do with that character. Now, I normally choose DC characters, and Shaun normally chooses Marvel characters. But as I said, Shaun is not here with me this week, so I get free rein. And when I get free rein, I do get to choose a Bat family member because they're my favourite thing just to kind of talk through. They're my favourite comic books growing up. And yeah, and I thought it might be fun. And also, this character has been requested so many times. Like, I'm talking, you guys really love her. And I love that because she's one of my favourite characters as well in comic books, and every week I'm like, I'm going to do Stephanie Browne. I'm doing Stephanie Browne. You've read the title. But I'm going to do Stephanie Browne, and then simultaneously I'm like, oh man, that's going to be like an hour-long episode because I'm going to have so many cool things I want to tell Shaun. If you like what you hear, if it's your first episode, you don't have to do anything. If it's your second or above, we would really appreciate 5 stars, a like, a follow, a share. I mean, 5 stars because I'm doing it by myself, that would be amazing. The 5 stars still going up on Spotify every single week, so thank you all very much for that. We have a Patreon as well, and you can head on over there. There's loads of extra episodes and bonus content and exclusive VIP content over there. There's movie reviews every month and just like a whole bunch of other stuff if you want to get access to that. Last month we reviewed Constantine, the 2005 classic with Keanu Reeves. If you're interested in a review of that, the month before, Star Wars. We've done most of the Star Wars at this point, so loads of reviews over there. We go back like 4 years at this point. But yeah, that's enough of all that stuff. Now it's time to get in to the character we're doing this week. As I've mentioned already, Stephanie Browne, otherwise known as Spoiler, otherwise known as the 4th Robin, otherwise known as the 3rd Batgirl. Yeah, that's a lot. I agree, that's a lot of titles. She is very important in a lot of different storylines. And I'm sure there's people who are listening to this who love this character, and I hope that I do them justice. To me, Stephanie Browne is to a lot of people what, like, say, Dick Grayson or Robin or Tim Drake are to me. Growing up, I was like, they're my favourites. And so Stephanie Browne is a lot of people's favourite characters growing up. And I completely understand that. Obviously, there's a really cool link in that she's also really heavily involved in a lot of Tim Drake storylines in the 90s. So that's how I came to know her. And then I was like, oh man, she's really, really cool. I would really like to read more about this character. So the amazing thing about Stephanie Browne is that there's very few DC characters that, despite how poorly they're treated in comic books, they still remain fan favourites. So while there's plenty that could be listed, Stephanie Browne, I would say, pretty much tops that list. She's been an integral part of the Bat family for like 20 years, but she's had several different costume changes. She just kind of, she sticks around. She's always in a different character. So whether it's Spoiler or Robin or Batgirl, she's always around, and she's always kind of in the background or doing something. While many characters stay the same, as I mentioned, she has basically shown, I would say, the most growth of any DC character, or a lot of them anyway. I know Dick Grayson normally gets mentioned as the one that, like, you can see the growth over the years. That's really cool to see as a reader. Stephanie Browne has the same thing. She has one of those character arcs that go over like 15 to 20 years, and then the New 52 comes along and completely just fucking, we're not going to talk about that, so we're going to talk pre-New 52 here. So if you want to learn about anything that happened after that, she kind of went missing for like 3 years, and then like it seemed like they erased her whole history, and then they brought her back. It was not good. I'm just going to tell you it's not good. But she has been around since the 1990s. So she's the way I always describe Stephanie Browne, and it's a very like cliche phrase, but she's probably the best character you've never heard of. And I know I say that a lot with DC characters, or heroes or zeros, but genuinely, it's one of those characters where I don't mainstream. She's not famous. I don't think a lot of people know who she is. But if you like Batman comic books, especially if you were a certain age in the 90s and in the 2000s growing up reading them, like Stephanie Browne is one of your favourites. And it's one of those characters you're like, oh yeah, I can instantly recognise that. So she's had 3 different identities, as I mentioned. And the main thing about Stephanie is she had to fight and earn basically every single one of them, despite Batman's wishes. Because this might surprise you, Batman's mostly a dick a lot of the time. So also a dick to Stephanie most of the time. Her father is a character we covered a few weeks ago on Hero Zero. That is Clue Master, otherwise known as Arthur Browne. He's a D-list Batman villain, basically. He's a Riddler knockoff. He's Riddler, but he's not as interesting as Riddler. And so during the 90s, Stephanie Browne's first appearance came in 1992's Detective Comics 647. She was created by Chuck Dixon in a story about her father, the long-time D-list villain, the Clue Master. She's clearly being introduced as a new supporting character for Robin, but her introduction is executed so well by Dixon, it gives us a character that immediately finds her own footing and feels like she's carved her own place in Gotham almost immediately. Like, she's so really, like, she comes out of the gate strong, is what I would describe it as. Like, the minute she appears in the comic books, you're like, this is a character who's 3D, has weight, feels like they're going to be around for a little bit, whereas a lot of characters in comics at the time, they kind of come and go. Like, oh, Tim Drake is dating this girl from his high school. You know that character's probably going to be there for maybe 3 issues, not that big a deal. But Stephanie had like a weird thing about her that it felt different. And so she immediately shows up, and the idea is that her father, of course, as I mentioned, Clue Master, he says he's on the straight and narrow. He spends her whole childhood in jail, and he gets out and he's like, I'm on the straight and narrow, kid. We're going to move to Gotham, and we're going to be grand, and like, I'm going to be your dad. It's all good. So they move to Gotham. And on return to the city, she finds out that her father is back to his old tricks, except he's no longer leaving any clues behind. Do you get it? Because he's the Clue Master. That's his thing. He commits a crime, and he doesn't leave a riddle. He leaves a clue. It's much different. It's completely different. It's not copyright at all because they're both DC, so you can't copy it. But yeah, he leaves clues behind. So suddenly crimes begin to get made, or crimes are being done, and she's like, my dad is definitely behind all of those crimes. And so in an attempt to try and stop her father, she creates a costume. She creates her own costume, like Spider-Man 1 Tobey Maguire style. And she begins to call herself the Spoiler. Now, it's a cool name because the idea is that she's there to spoil her father's, like, his bad deeds or his crimes. And so that's where she gets the name Spoiler. And it's a really cool purple suit, cool hood, cool mask. And so she discovers her father's plans because her dad is an idiot, D-list villain, not very smart. She finds out what he's going to do before he does it. And his locations where he's at, and she decides to leave clues in an attempt to have him caught by Batman and Robin. So she's not actually capturing him, but she's leaving all the clues for Batman and Robin to find him. Despite being new to the world of capes, she's able to get by with her enthusiasm and her dedication. And when Robin eventually finds the Clue Master, Spoiler joins him in the fight, and she helps Tim Drake. This is Tim Drake's Robin, by the way. Tim Drake, his Robin captures Clue Master, and Spoiler helps. You can see how immediately she gets thrown into this complete world. And every time her father escapes, Stephanie dons her costume again and goes out to stop him. So she appears the first few times like this, basically. Her father shows up, Clue Master shows up, you're like, okay, where's Stephanie? She's knocking about. She shows up. Her and Tim are constantly like just kind of seeing each other a lot. They're both like 15, 16. You're seeing where this is going. Having stopped her father a few times, she takes a liking to crime fighting and continues patrolling a few nights a week. She quickly draws the attention of Batman and Robin, and over time she becomes a major supporting character in Tim Drake's solo series. So this is the Robin series that Tim Drake had in the 90s, one of my favourite comic book series of all time. Just so cool that Tim Drake, it was Batman had his own issues and Robin had his own issues, and Tim Drake got to do his own missions. Obviously much more aimed towards, say, like the teenagers at the time, but it was just an interesting idea that they thought, and it sold a lot of issues. People really liked Tim Drake. So she becomes a major character in that solo series. Chuck Dixon, the writer, seemed to really like her, so she stuck around for years. When Tim broke up with his girlfriend, he and Spoiler began dating. However, Spoiler still has no idea who's behind Robin's mask, and it's awkward for Tim. So he knows her identity, but he can't tell her who he is, because if he does, she'll figure out who Batman is. And they write it like that wasn't Tim's secret to tell, so he keeps quiet kind of thing. So after a few weeks, Robin and Stephanie, I'm saying Robin, not Tim, officially start dating. So she's dating Robin, but she doesn't know that his name is Tim Drake or what he looks like without the mask. But to be honest with you, the Robin mask is tiny, so I mean, you basically know what he looks like, so it's the same thing. However, then they needed a big comic book panel. They needed a cover of the next comic book issue, or maybe a last panel of the last issue, to get people to tune in. So her and Tim, they're finally together. They start dating. Everything's going well. They're in love. They're having a few smoochies. They didn't call them back then, and they don't call them now. I'm not cool enough. I'm certainly uncool having said that. But they reveal in a final panel of the series that something's changed, that Stephanie is pregnant. Of course, it's written like dun dun dun, like Dios mio at the end of all those like dramas. But it's implied that her and Tim are after having sex and after having a baby. However, then it's revealed in the next issue that the father of Stephanie's baby wasn't Tim Drake or Robin, but a former boyfriend who had then skipped town. So Stephanie then decides to have the baby, but she didn't have much of a support system in place for how to deal with the child. Her father is back in prison. Her mother is like not in a great place herself. And to help her cope, Tim basically creates a new identity. I think he calls himself, it's something Draper. It's Alvin Draper he calls himself. I remember that stupid name. It's very similar to Matches Malone that Batman sometimes does. So he becomes Alvin Draper, who's a third identity. And then he like accompanies her to all of like the pregnancy classes and like helps her out during the pregnancy and everything in the comic book series. It's all just kind of, I don't know if it's good or bad. It's just funny to look at because he's like, I know a good idea. Alvin Draper. And it looks the same as Tim Drake. Like, it's just Tim Drake. But she doesn't know that his name is Tim Drake. So, however, after this, she obviously knows that Alvin, by the way, is Tim Drake or Robin, but he's put on a disguise, per se. Having given birth to a baby girl, Stephanie decides to give the child up for adoption without ever seeing her daughter's face, which is what part of the storyline is. So she puts the child up for adoption. Depictions of teen pregnancy, by the way, pretty much unheard of at the time. And so to have Tim a male teenage boy who's like 16 helping Stephanie, who's a teenage girl who's 16, as she made responsible decisions and like maturely handles her pregnancy. It was actually a pretty groundbreaking storyline. I think it was like 95, maybe 94, 95 at this point. So all pretty groundbreaking to show them not to even, it's never implied that like this is wrong. Or like it's looked down upon or whatever. It's just like, look, she's pregnant and they deal with it the best that they can. And then she's like, I can't deal with this baby. So she puts the baby up for adoption because she's like, I don't know if I'm in the right place in my life to look after the child. And like, it's never commented on one way or the other what like, there's no bias from the writers is what I would say, which can sometimes happen in lots of comic books. They put a slant on it. It's just kind of, this is the decisions that you make, and it's a situation that these characters have acted like humans, basically. That you just have to read it and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But two 16-year-olds doing that, pretty groundbreaking in comic books in general at the time. So after the pregnancy, she takes, obviously, there's a few months where she doesn't show up, and then she shows back up, full spoiler costume. She's back out in the street. She's back doing the crime fighting. And Batman then decides that he's going to train Stephanie, and he's going to have her mentor under the birds of prey. So Black Canary is going to train her. So he's like, look, if you're going to be out fighting anyway, you're always with Robin. Just go train with Black Canary and I think Wildcat, and they'll help you fight. He also tells her Tim's identity because Batman likes drama, even though he pretends that he doesn't, and he just kind of wants to be a dick, mostly. So he's like, you're not going to believe this, but that's actually Tim Drake. So it's a weird thing, so then Tim doesn't tell him. This drives a wedge between the two of them because Batman's just a dick most of the time. Ever the bipolar sociopath though, Batman then decides that she's not crime-fighting material and cuts off her training. So this is classic Batman, just classic like, I'll train you. No, I've changed my mind now that I've caused drama. It's classic storylines for Batman. He's just a fucking, he just comes up with shit, does mad shit, and then everybody else has to deal with the consequences. This does obviously little to dissuade her nightly patrols, so she's still doing them. And along this time, however, Tim's dad, Jack Drake, he finds out that his son is Robin. He finds out that his son is going out every night, putting on the Robin cape, and he's going fighting crimes. Jack's not happy about this. I would go so far as to say he is livid. That's who he's not happy with old Brucey boy. So he decides that he's like, Tim, you are a dickhead for doing that. Bruce, you're a bigger dickhead. But Tim, you have to retire. You have to hang up the cape and you can't be Robin anymore. And Tim is like, he doesn't want to start a fight. He doesn't want to like cause any drama. So he's like, look, okay, I'll give up Robin. I'm sorry for lying to you. I went out. I put myself in danger every single night, blah, blah, blah. So Tim retires, technically. I'm putting quotation marks around that. It's comic books. But Tim retires. And he's like, I'm going to go hang out with my dad. Seeing the opening, however, Stephanie sneaks into the Batcave and demands a chance to be Robin. So she's like, look, if Tim's not around, and I'm always fighting with Tim, we fight together all the time, I'll be Robin. And in a moment that didn't receive anywhere near the fanfare it should, I think, Stephanie became the fourth Robin in comic books, which is something that I don't think anybody really knows. Now, she's kind of set up to fail from the start, and she's just there as fodder for a later storyline, but technically she's the fourth Robin, and you can't ever take that away. She's been brought in to replace Tim. She leaps into the role with both feet, and after years of hard work, constantly being told she wasn't good enough by Batman and Robin and everyone, and still going forward anyway, Stephanie has officially become a member of the Batman team, and everyone who's reading it, who's like, she's a big fan favourite, they're like, she's one of us, she's just like a regular person who's not very good at things but just wants to try. She's not rich, she's not poor, she's just kind of like, just wants to do good. And so she finally becomes Robin. Everyone rejoices. Things, however, went south rather quickly because Bruce has one main rule. The main rule was that she had to follow every single order he gave to the letter. Unlike Batman, he's not normally that bossy. However, when facing off against a superpowered menace just a month or so later, so Stephanie's full Robin gear, it's a cool outfit by the way, if you haven't seen an image of her as Robin, I would recommend looking it up. Batman finds himself in a deadly situation. And Stephanie's like, I'm going to help you, boss. I'm going to impress. So she goes running in. He's like, don't come into this situation. I have it under control. She's like, no, I got this. You see where this is going. She comes in, completely fucks up the situation. The villain gets away. And she just kind of interferes and just gets, like, Batman's like, I had it under control. She ignored him and immediately he fires her. He fires her for ignoring a direct order almost, I think, like a week in, maybe 2 weeks in. So then she's gone. Stephanie felt, correctly so, like she had been cut out. And in a way to kind of prove that she was worthy of this job, she's like, on her way out of the Batcave, so Bruce has fired her, she steals some of Batman's emergency plans, or his plans that he has there, just to be like, these are like grand plans that I'm going to eventually do. And one of them is one of Bruce's theoretical plans that he had kind of written up to try and take out lots of organised crime at once. And as a way to prove her worth and re-earn her place in the Bat family, she decides, I'm going to initiate this plan, then Bruce has got to love me. And this starts a storyline called War Games, which is a very problematic storyline in lots of different ways. But she just starts a massive gang war, because the plan is very dependent on obviously Bruce knowing that it's happening, because Matches Malone is a major part of the plot, and he's there to kind of delegate amongst the criminals to like make them mad at each other. And because Bruce doesn't know that the plan is going on, it all just completely breaks down, and immediately just massive gang wars take place in Gotham, and the place just gets set on fire, like everywhere. There's gangs everywhere. Black Mask is taking over the city, and just lots of people are dying all over the place. And she's like, this is kind of my fault. Massive gang war, as I said, and Black Mask rises to the top. And while he's there, she's like, I'm going to go stop Black Mask. Then Bruce is going to like me. Because if I stop Black Mask, then Bruce is going to be like, look, you kind of fucked up, but then you brought it back and we're all cool. So she goes to fight Black Mask. Immediately gets absolutely the shit kicked out of her. To the point of she gets tortured. And she gets captured, then she gets really viciously tortured, and she escapes at the last second, finding her way to Leslie Tompkins' hospital. She crawls out like covered in bleeding everywhere. She gets her to Leslie Tompkins' hospital, and while she's there, she actually dies. The character of Stephanie Browne dies in that hospital. And as she dies, Batman stands beside her and tells her, she asks if she ever was really a Robin, and he says yes. Now, it's never said whether he's just saying that, because, as I said, Batman, he just makes shit up. Like, he can change on a minute-to-minute basis. But at this point, he seems nice, so that's normally suspicious. I take it as he was being genuine. Maybe, I count her as a fourth Robin. Batman could just be fucking, he has a plan upon a plan. If he tells her this, then 4 years later, something else is going to happen. I don't know. Depends how the writers want to take it. But I take it as face value. He's like, yeah, you were a Robin. And then she dies happy in her last moments. Or so we thought, because it's comic books. So she dies, but does anyone ever really die other than Uncle Ben? So, for several years, it was understood that Stephanie had died. Her loss was constantly felt by Tim and her friend Cassandra Cain, who was Batgirl at this point. We've covered Cassandra Cain, an absolute badass killer. Don't watch Birds of Prey the movie for Cassandra Cain. Watch Birds of Prey the movie because it's great, but don't watch it because Cassandra Cain's depiction of that is not good. But during that time, it continued to appear that Bruce had cast her off almost callously. She didn't get a costume in like a glass case in the Batcave, which everybody else got. So readers were kind of like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why are they treating this character so... They always treat her terribly, which makes people who are reading it like her more, because she's an even bigger underdog. She didn't get a costume in the glass case. However, eventually we discover that she was in fact alive. We're all shocked. We're all horrified. What are you talking about? We're talking a death fake out. Yeah, she faked her own death thanks to Leslie Tompkins, who had taken her out of the country to heal her from her near-fatal injuries and had pretended that she had died. War Games, the storyline, was not very good. I'm going to tell you that now because, Leslie Tompkins, up until this point, had never actually done anything bad. She was always about, let's do everything good. And then they did a weird thing where she's like, I betrayed you, Batman, to make a point that you shouldn't let these kids die, kind of thing. It was just weird. It just made no sense. A lot of people were acting super duper weird in that storyline. So at this point, it was late in the 2000s. DC's continuity was rapidly collapsing inward on itself. New 52 was approaching in 2011. The DC's continuity was it was getting a lot. It had been since 1986. A lot of stuff had happened. There was a lot of history. They have to do that reset every 30 years to try and get it back to level 0. It was Bruce Wayne's death in 2008, so Batman R.I.P., the storyline we've talked about a lot, and then the one that follows after that is Battle for the Cowl, which is one of my favourite storylines, possibly my favourite comic book storyline of all time. It was Bruce Wayne's death that changed everything for Stephanie. So after her boss and mentor died, Cassandra Cain, who's Batgirl, becomes disillusioned. And so she's like, I don't want to be Batgirl anymore. By the way, Stephanie's now back. She just comes back to Gotham. She's spoiler. And everything's fine. It's like, I wasn't actually dead. Hey. So Cassandra Cain leaves. And Cassandra had held the role of Batgirl since shortly after No Man's Land. And with Bruce dead, she wanted no part of being it. Cassandra then hinted that Stephanie could have the job if she wanted it. And Stephanie, of course, is like, yeah, I want to be Batgirl, because all she wants to do is be part of the Bat family and just belong with a group of people, because she tries so hard all the time, and they never give her any props. And so Stephanie had earned the right to be Batgirl, and she basically thrived in the role. It's one of the best comic book runs. There's a 24-issue series. In 2009, I think it starts, maybe 2009 to 11. But I would absolutely recommend reading those 24 issues. They are absolutely outstanding. So some of the best writing of all time when it comes to Stephanie Browne. It's probably her strongest stories ever. Because she becomes Batgirl and immediately it all fits. It all makes perfect sense. She's a great Batgirl. She has Barbara Gordon as Oracle in the chair, helping her out, who's the original Batgirl. And it just worked really, really well. And it was unquestionably kind of where she belonged from the start, and the readers were really, really loving it. Because Bruce died, Dick becomes Batman, Damian Wayne became Robin, Tim goes mad searching for Bruce, and Stephanie becomes Batgirl. And it was written by Brian Q. Miller, and once again, absolutely go out your way to read it. And it kind of makes you understand why she's so popular as a character as well. That's kind of a culmination of all these years. However, and even when Bruce returned, because obviously nobody's ever really dead in comic books, Batman's dead, but he's actually not. I'm not going to get into where he went, but it involved time travel, and it's TC's continuity collapsing in. Just figure it out. But he comes back and she immediately slaps him, which he absolutely deserves. Like Manny, Stephanie is a casualty of the New 52. However, her series was cancelled. Barbara was then moved back to Batgirl. Stephanie was gone altogether, and it's just completely vanished. There was an idea that they were going to make her Nightwing in the Smallville comic. However, then there was an editor's note to change it to made her Barbara. So they coloured her hair red instead of blonde in the issues, and they just started calling her Barbara instead, because one of the editors was like, Barbara will sell more issues, put Barbara in the comic book. This obviously outraged people because they were sure she'd be forgotten. She was no longer getting any stories. She didn't even exist in the New 52. People were not happy. A lot of people were calling it or writing into DC basically being like, this fucking sucks, what the fuck are you doing? But of course, despite some manhandling, Stephanie's been an endearing character. It's understandable why her presence in the New 52 was sorely missed. And she does come back like 2 years later. I think like it took like 2014, 2015 for her to come back. But it doesn't really have the same kind of history behind it as like us watching her from like 92, starting off as like, I want to hang out with Robin, to like becoming full-fledged Batgirl and having everyone's respect. Stephanie was also a lot of cool things about her character that I kind of wanted to get into. Her set of storylines. She was unique because she was like a cheery, low-income kid. She was like, she didn't know all the ins and outs of crime. And superhero comics, I think, are like always so frequently like classist in a way. Like I can't really figure out another way of like she was not in like the I did what I had to do, I committed crimes to survive and like live by my family, and or else she wasn't like super rich like Bruce Wayne. She was just like low income, week to week, month to month wages. Her mother just like tried to get by and they survived, but she wasn't like, they had a house, they weren't like poor, but they weren't rich either. So it was just kind of like, she was just somebody who didn't really know anything about ins and outs. She wasn't really angry. That's one of the main things about, she's not angry at being like lower middle class and like, I'm gonna do this to strike out. She's just like, she's angry at her dad because she's like, just stop being a fucking dickhead and stop committing crimes. That's all you had to do. She wasn't like Batman or Daredevil with their fancy homes, but she wasn't in the doldrums either, like Jason Todd. Like she wasn't like stealing tires off the Batmobile. She was not a slum stereotype or suburbia kind of thing either. So Brian Q. Miller, who wrote her entire Batgirl series, actually came out with a quote that I found, and she was like, Stephanie was a bit of a beacon of positivity for me as a writer, and hopefully for everyone else that was reading it too. So that's kind of the best way to describe her as a character, just like positivity. You can see why people like her, and very much reminds me a lot of Dick Grayson as Nightwing, and that like the positivity of like they've gone through so much fucked up shit, and then you have a character that's always making jokes, one-liners, Spider-Man as well, you know, the usual thing. Like you can see why people gravitate towards those people. And so like back in 2004, years before Brian Q. Miller, the talent on the Batman related comics were told that they had to come up with a sort of gang war that Spiler was going to die. And what was interesting was, having gone back to do a bit of research on this, Dylan Harrox, who was the current writer on the Robin books at the time, he called that one of the most depressing weeks of his life. Like they asked him, do a gang war storyline. This is before War Games. They were like, do a gang war storyline, Spiler's gotta die. And he was writing those comic books and he was like, this is the worst, like, why? I don't want to do this. This is terrible. But they were like, this is what we wanted to do. And even more so, they were like, we want her to be promoted from Spiler to the new Robin as a fake out to then get the death of her to mean even more. So it was all done to like, she was being fridged in another way. They were bidding her. That was the plan. They were fridging this character that people really loved. And so all the writers who worked there at the time have kind of come out and were like, that was a really depressing time because we kept telling them we don't want to kill this character, and they were like, it'll sell comics, kid. You know what I mean? Like J. Jonah Jameson style. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And they very much were like, we could do something else, and they were all ignored. And so that's kind of one of my major things of like, even the writers really loved writing for the character just because of who she was and like what she brought to the Batman world, because obviously very dour place. So if you can get one or two characters that are dickheads, all the better. So in terms of powers and abilities, her abilities are acrobatics. She's trained by Batman and she has her own experience, but she's not like the best in anything. She's a very just solid across the board fighter. She's not Dick Grayson athlete. She's not Batman like fighting style. She's not as smart as Tim Drake's Robin, but she's like 8 in all the categories instead of being 10 in one and like 3 in another. So she has a lot of computer hacking talents as well. She was trained by Oracle. She's trained by Batman in escapology. So she has like bits of all of them. And that's kind of what makes her really unique, is that she just comes in as a nobody and they don't really want to train her, but then eventually they do all kind of get around to training her. And so she takes bits of everybody and she kind of just envelops it herself. And by the time she gets to like 2010, she's a fully fledged, like, this is a straight up like Bat family member. Whereas maybe in the 90s it's like, oh, she's someone who tags along. Now it's like, oh, she's part of the family. If there's a problem, we call her in. She's like completely qualified to do whatever she wants. And yeah, so that is in terms of powers and ability. That is my report on Stephanie Browne. I hope it kind of lived up to expectations. It's one of those characters where I think people should read more about her. She's really, really great. And I hope that kind of comes across. I could do this on Dick Grayson or Tim Drake, but we would also talk for a very long time. But yeah, that is the end of this episode. If you like what you heard, we've got hundreds of these episodes covering loads of DC and Marvel characters. If you have a favourite character, look it up. Maybe it's on Spotify, maybe it's on iTunes. If it's not there, or on Apple Podcasts, I should say. If it's not there, message us. Send us a message on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. We have the Patreon message board. Send us basically anywhere you can and we'll get through the list, because people are always sending things in. I know this was sent in so many times over the Patreon, over on Instagram and Twitter. People love this character, and so I'm very happy to do it. But yeah, so that is my report on Stephanie Browne. You can follow us at all the things, all the links are down below. And just remember just to tell one human being that we exist. Just a one, please. So I've been Conor Lawler, and we shall see you all next week, guys. Bye!